Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Tonight on Farage, can we take back control of our lawless cities? Labour, 12 points in the lead. We're going to find out tonight what's their policy on the English Channel crossings that hit a record yesterday. Tony Blair back in the education debate. He wants to abolish GCSEs and A-levels. But what are the alternatives? And joining me on Talking Pints, Brian Toomey, a jockey who was dead for quite a period of time, but he's now very much back to life. We'll talk about endurance, survival and positive thinking. But before all of that, let's get the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Nigel. I am Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. A manhunt is underway after a 9-year-old child was fatally shot in Liverpool last night. Police have named the schoolgirl who was killed as Olivia Pratt Corbell. Officers were called to a house in the Knotty Ash area after an unknown man who was being chased by a gunman forced his way into the property. Police say shots were fired, hitting a woman, Olivia's mother, and fatally wounding the young girl. Detectives are urging criminals to assist with their inquiries and are asking anyone with information to come forward.
Their family are absolutely devastated, inconsolable and heartbroken. I know that the murder of Olivia has rocked our communities, who are quite rightly upset and outraged that such an abhorrent crime has occurred here on the streets of Merseyside.
A woman who was reported missing nearly 8 weeks ago has been found safe and well. The Met Police say 24-year-old student nurse Owami Davies was found in Hampshire after a call to police from someone who'd seen media appeals. She was last seen walking in Croydon in early July and concern had been growing for her safety. DCI Nigel Penny thanked members of the public for their help.
Officers have worked around the clock following thousands of lines of inquiry in order to locate Owami Davies. But I would like to thank the media and the members of the public who assisted so much in this case.
The Tory leadership hustings are currently taking place in Birmingham as Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak go head-to-head. Ms Truss says business as usual is not the right way to deal with the cost of living crisis. It comes as industry leaders are warning households are facing a catastrophic winter amid soaring energy bills. EDF's managing director says half of UK families could be in fuel poverty come January, when the energy prices could reach £4,600.
I will immediately take action to reduce taxes, to have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy to save people money on their fuel bills, because I recognise people are facing an immediate struggle. I'm prepared to be bold as Prime Minister. I'm prepared to do things differently, and growing the economy is vital.
A record number of Channel migrants have crossed the English Channel in a single day. Nearly 1,300 were detected on small boats yesterday. It comes as GB News saw evidence that those trying to cross to the UK in the back of lorries also continues to be an ongoing problem. In the past year, official figures reveal around 8,000 people were detected at UK ports having illegally crossed the Channel. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Farage.
Good evening. I fear that society is breaking down in our cities. Neighbours don't even know the Christian names of those that live next door to them. Often they have no shared interests, no shared culture. In too many cases, in our inner cities, people are not even sharing the same language. And part of this community breakdown is, I think, a terrifying rise in violence. Do you know, violence that led to injury has risen 22% in the last calendar year alone. A 9-year-old girl was shot in a house in Notting Ash, a suburb of Liverpool, last night. There were 6 knife murders in London last week in the space of 4 days. Deaths even in Kent market towns like Tunbridge through knife crime. And another phenomenon that appears to be sweeping the country in the most terrifying manner happened in Nottingham 2 days ago. Have a look at this. A gang of 50 youths going into a McDonald's and literally ransacking the place. Complete and utter lawlessness. But it's not just in Nottingham, it happened in Oxford Street just a couple of weeks ago, and yet appeared on TikTok to be a cause of celebration.
Indulging that in my great tracksuit, see the bulging that, see the motion clap when you're throwing it back. These females planning on doing me wrong, so I'm grabbing a dome at the Trojan pack. Post the location after we're gone, can't slip and let them know it. How life would have been if I never did take them risks, and would have I prospered. Floating and I won't go under. How can I be homophobic?
It's absolutely terrifying. It's appalling. So it isn't just gun crime. It isn't just knife crime. It is outright lawlessness. I've talked about breakdown in society, but hey, there's something else we should talk about, and that's policing. What the hell has gone wrong with our policing? Most of us now who are victims of crime don't even bother to report it. So the official figures on crime stats are, in my view, massively, massively underestimated. My question for you at home this evening is, can we take back control of our streets? Give me your view, Farage at gbnews.uk. Or is it simply just too late? Are our cities gone? Well, I refuse to believe that. And that's because I knew 1980s New York as a young man working in business, and it was a very, very scary place. You didn't leave a bar or a restaurant until the taxi was there, waiting on the pavement edge. And even then you were worried, walking the length of a cricket pitch to the car. And a man called Rudy Giuliani came in as mayor, worked with the police and turned it around. I refuse to believe that it's too late. But what of our police? Because they, it seems to me, are letting us down very, very badly. Well, joining me, Peter Blexley, and of course, famously Metropolitan Police Detective, author, many other things. Peter, when you see mobs, ransacking Oxford Street, going into McDonald's and causing chaos, and that apart from the rise of knife crime, gun crime, genuine, serious injury against the individual, can we save this? Can we turn this round?
Well, there is no doubt that policing is in crisis, and it has been for some considerable time. There are other issues, particularly with these young people ransacking places. What kind of upbringing must they have had? But I'll stick to policing, if I may. About 25 years ago, some bright spark thought it would be a really good idea to send the up-and-coming cops to go and get degrees. So they went off to our great seats of learning. Many of them did. Oxford, Cambridge and red brick unis. And they came back with their degrees, so they had letters after their name instead of before their name, like PC and DC, And quite frankly, many of them came back with a whole head full of pseudo-intellectual claptrap, which they applied to policing. Policing is about practicalities. You really don't need a degree to be a cop. You need to be practical, to be endowed with common sense so that you can find solutions to problems. You also need to be persuasive, so you can persuade victims to come forward, witnesses, persuade criminals to become informants, and persuade your colleagues you're doing the right thing. And sadly, a lot of this has been lost by the police trying to be everything to everyone. The painting rainbows on cars, the holding flags, the skateboarding with protesters, the dancing at pride events, and all of that. It has
Peter
no
Blexley,
place.
you're out of date. You're not in tune with modern times. I've read reports from left-wing think tanks that say bobbies on the beat make no difference to crime whatsoever. What say you?
Well, that's utter nonsense, of course. But the trouble is, in modern-day thinking, you can't measure the effectiveness of that bobby on the beat. Because quite simply, that officer could leave their station in the morning to go and patrol a given area for 8 hours, and they might come back and they may well not have arrested anybody, but the good ones will come back awash with tea and biscuits and awash with information.
Intel.
Because they've engaged with their communities.
Yeah.
But you try telling some management kind of over-intellectualising senior officer that I've actually been effective today, and they'll say, I can't put that into a league table. I can't show how well our service is doing. So sadly, that's one of the reasons why neighbourhood and community policing has been eroded. And it's so strong, it's a principle of policing, it must come back. There were other factors, the terrorist attacks of some years ago and what have you,
Sure.
redeploying of resources.
But, you know, you talk about numbers and what's measurable. I'll give you a measurable number. 50 youths ransack McDonald's in Nottingham, not a single arrest.
Yeah, and I've got a son studying at Nottingham, soon to go back to the university there. And that's a concern for me. You see, if we go back to that bobby on the beat, what prevented a lot of crime, and I know I'm talking about some years ago, but I firmly believe it is still applicable, what would stop crime is the fear of that bobby turning the corner and suddenly confronting you. Now, clearly, those youths are well aware of modern policing, and they probably knew that there was nobody going to come, nobody going to turn up, and that offence will now be investigated retrospectively. But will the Crown Prosecution Service say prosecuting somebody for nicking a burger and perhaps a portion of chips, does it make sense financially? So will they do it?
And in the case of Nottingham, of the 50, and I haven't got the precise numbers, but the majority were young black men. Does that pose the police a problem?
Well, the police have tried to dance around the whole race issue for a long, long time, because back in the dark days of the late 70s and the early 80s, when I was policing in uniform just a few short miles from here, some young black men were fitted up, beaten up, brutalised.
So that did happen?
Oh, it most definitely happened. And they were subjected to some appalling behaviour. Many police officers, to give credit where it's due, have taken great strides to readdress that. But of course, race is inextricably tied into the thorny subject of stop and search, which forever rears its head again and again and again, and is, of course, a mightily powerful tool for the police, but they haven't been able to kind of get it right. Partially because their leaders are so cowardly and silent. Police officers on the front line need vocal leaders that will stand up for them, defend them, put their case forward, instead of worrying about climbing that greasy pole of promotion.
Peter Blexley, plain spoken, as I absolutely thought that you would be. And really the message there from Peter Blexley is that the fish rots from the head down. The vast majority of policemen and women out there want to be able to do their job, and they really do. Let me know your thoughts, farage@gbnews.uk. Can we get back control of our cities? I refuse to surrender. Now, amidst the absolute carnage and chaos of the Conservative leadership race and the continuing blue-on-blue attacks, and Rishi is never going to give up, I don't think, there is some good news for the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. Polls now, and quite a consistent number of polls, showing him to be 12% ahead, and it sounds like quite a big number. I'm minded to say that he did steal the initiative with his cap on domestic energy prices, even if there was no explanation of how to pay for it, but that perhaps helped. That was one clear policy statement that Starmer gave when he came back from his summer holiday. But I'm tempted to think that a Labour leader with charisma and a real vision for Britain would be at least 20% points in the lead. That's my view, but let's ask Nigel Nelson, political editor of the Sunday Mirror. Westminster veteran. You've seen it all before.
Indeed.
You've seen leaders climb and leaders fall. I mean, I guess 12 points in the lead. You're relatively happy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's gone up from 8 points on Sunday to 12 points now. He actually got a 15 the previous week. But the 12 points now, if he was to maintain a lead like that, that takes away any idea of coalition with SNP or Lib Dems or whatever. He would be returned with a 58 MP majority. So it's a good lead. Now, obviously, we're some way away from the election. I still think it might come in spring, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But we're some way away. So
do you really?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it rather depends on when the new Prime Minister comes in. The question really comes down to, do you get a bounce from that? There's some suggestion that Liz Truss, if it's her and Rishi Sunak, haven't performed well enough to actually get that bounce. But supposing they did, the best thing they could do would be to hold a snap election to get their own mandate, not make the mistake that Gordon Brown did back in 2007, where he dithered.
Yeah.
And of course, he then lasted till 2010.
But equally, Theresa May tried to do that in 2017.
And it can fail.
And it all went wrong.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, elections are a gamble, as we know. Yeah.
All right, so he's got a lead. At the minute, he would win a majority, but on so many major issues, I've literally got no idea where he stands. I'm hoping to speak to the Shadow Minister for Immigration, Stephen Kinnock, this evening. But I mean, you know, the cross-channel. Well, actually, when I say the cross-channel, I mean it isn't. You know, a crisis. It's becoming an emergency.
Yes. I mean, we're talking about predictions now of 60,000 this year crossing the Channel, which is double what we had last year. And yes, you've got to do something about it.
So where do Labour stand? Help me.
I don't know is the answer.
Good.
So far they've criticised the way the Tories have done it. I haven't seen at the moment what I would call a credible alternative. I mean, the answer would be the only way to disrupt the organised crime gangs is to make sure you can do things like not have to claim asylum in this country, claim asylum elsewhere, so there's no need to cross the Channel. There's all sorts of things like that. What I do think Labour is doing is they're busy at the moment constructing the kind of manifesto they will put out come election time. And I think Keir Starmer being cautious means that he's not going to shoot his bolt, if you like, too early, and we will actually hear these policies a bit later on.
But we could do with a hint, couldn't we? I mean, when it comes to energy supply, I literally have no idea. Does he believe we should increase domestic gas production? Doesn't he? Does he believe in more offshore wind turbines? I mean, these are major issues affecting this country and its future. And I completely understand why he may not be giving detailed policy proposals, but a steer might be handy.
Yes, I mean, I think that, again, it's a question of priorities. So the absolute priority at the moment, before we consider the energy supply, I mean, things we rather hope will get better if the Ukraine war ends. And there are some predictions it might end by the end of the year. But at the moment, we're looking at absolutely appalling bills for people, starting in October, going through January into April, bills that people can't afford. We've got a government that is paralysed at the moment. We've got no real kind of policies from Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss about how they would deal with these rising bills. So what Keir Starmer has done is fill the vacuum, and he's saying, look, I've got a costed policy.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So we know it's going to cost 29 billion, and we know where it comes from.
Albeit just for 6 months.
For 6 months as a beginning, yeah. I mean, it may well be you'd have to extend it, but obviously, let's take us through to April when things are going to get really bad according to the predictions, and let's see where we are after that.
Do you think Starmer's going to win the next election with a majority?
Yes. I think there's no reason why he shouldn't. I do agree with you. I'd like to hear more about the direction he wants to go in. I'd like to see
anything.
I'd like to see official Labour Party policy not to be sitting on the fence on everything.
Yeah.
So there are things like that. I'm looking forward to party conference where I hope he will set out his stall. But yes, I think that he's got it in him to be the next Prime Minister. Minister.
Right, a very bullish Nigel Nelson there. He thinks Sir Keir, no policies Starmer, is going to win a majority at the next election. We will in a moment continue debate on the channel, but in particular, we're going to refer to another Labour figure. Tony Blair, yes, the man who sent millions of our kids to university, left them with loads of debt and no better jobs. He's now saying we should scrap GCSEs and A-levels. We'll debate that in just a moment. Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Can we take back control of our lawless cities? Well, some of your reactions coming in. Kevin says, we need a lot more police on the street for starters. You hardly ever see them patrolling the street these days. Well, that's true. You simply don't see them. Alan says, not while the offended by everything brigade are here. Another viewer says the law needs to get much tougher. Criminals don't respect the law because it's far too soft. And Peter says, there is supposed to be a 4-year sentence for carrying a knife. How many have been given that sentence? Really good question, Peter, and one that we here at GB News really ought to research. And I will, and I'll come back to you on it. As predicted on this show last night, we said over 1,000 people would cross the channel yesterday, and as I was going home from the show, I heard reports of more boats. The official number was 1,295 that crossed the English Channel yesterday. That, of course, is without those that arrived by lorry and weren't detected, or perhaps by other routes. It is an all-time record for this crisis. We, of course, approached the Home Office for comment. And they said the rise in dangerous channel crossings was unacceptable, oh really, and that new laws would enable it to crack down on abuses with people smugglers, and they will now face a maximum life in jail sentence. A spokesman said it was continuing preparations to deport to Rwanda. Those who made the dangerous, unnecessary, illegal journeys into the UK would be sent there. How many times do we have to hear this drivel? None of it ever comes to pass. They are failing. The public is getting increasingly angry. And as I've said before, and I'll say it again, it is posing a genuine threat to our national security. Well, if they can't do the job, what about Labour? Well, I'm joined now by Stephen Kinnock, MP for Aberavon and the Shadow Minister for Immigration. Stephen, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Hello.
Hello. So every promise that's been made by Priti Patel and indeed Boris Johnson since 2019 that they were going to get tough, going to deal with it, that the levels are unacceptable, all of it has come to absolutely nothing. I would really, honestly, genuinely, sincerely like to know, what is the Labour policy?
Well, you're right that we're failing to deal with this issue, and one of the reasons is that we have a Home Secretary who loves to just chase headlines rather than have a proper, tangible plan in place. Labour's plan is clear. Rather than waste millions of pounds of taxpayers' money on the madcap Rwanda scheme that isn't going to deter anybody from making these crossings, let's use that money to boost the National Crime Agency. We would recruit over 100 specialists that would be working closely with the authorities in France and Belgium and other EU countries to actually crack down on the evil people smugglers. There have been a number of very successful operations recently, and we can do much more. That means actually seconding specialists out to those countries and working much more closely with them. So cracking down on the evil people smugglers at source is vital. The other big failing of Priti Patel is that the number of asylum applications that are being processed has fallen off a cliff on her watch. And as a result, we have 37,000 asylum seekers in emergency hotels, costing the taxpayer £4.7 million a day. And one of the big problems with that is that some of those asylum seekers, probably around 25 to 30%, is how many normally fail in their asylum applications. They're not valid asylum seekers, but if you don't process them, you don't identify them as being invalid, and you're not therefore able to send them back to the first safe country that they came through. So let's actually use the wasted money on Rwanda, put that into investing for the NCA and in more decision makers so that we can process these asylum seekers, clear the backlog, and start to tackle this terrible issue.
Points there, Stephen. I mean, number one, you're quite right. The National Crime Agency, in conjunction with other European police forces, did have a very successful arrest of 39 people smugglers, and for a couple of weeks, it slowed the numbers. But when you can make millions and millions of euros a week, I suspect there's always someone to replace them. But let's be clear. For those people who come to this country who do not qualify for genuine refugee status, and I would rather suggest to you that almost all of the young Albanians coming would not, be clear, would the Labour Party deport those people?
You have to, first of all, process their claim. That's the problem, Nigel. If you've just got people waiting in limbo, what do you do with them? And also, because we failed to negotiate a successor to the Dublin regulation, we're not able to send people back to their first safe country that they alighted in. So the total failure of the government since Brexit to negotiate a successor to Dublin is a massive issue in all of this. But once you have processed people, you can say whether or not their application for asylum is valid or not. And if it isn't, you have to be ready to deport them. That is absolutely clear. And that is Labour's policy.
Well, Stephen. The Dublin regulation, whilst we were EU members, only applied to people who had previously submitted asylum applications. I asked you a very simple question. Would a Labour government deport those who failed refugee status? And you answered me by saying we have to be prepared to. Would you or would you not?
Yes, those who are not valid asylum applicants should not be granted asylum, and therefore they can't get into the country to work, because you only get into the country on the basis of the points-based immigration system. And if you don't have the points and you don't have a sponsor employer, you can't remain in this country. Now, there are big challenges around deportation. There are some countries that don't want to cooperate with us on deportation, and because we don't have a successor to the Dublin regulation, we're not able to deport people back to the first safe country in which they landed, which was part of the burden-sharing arrangements that we had when we were under Dublin. So,
no.
You know, we're stuck in that limbo. But if you don't have a points-based qualification and you don't have a sponsor employer and you are not a valid asylum seeker,
no, I'm sorry, Stephen Kinnock. Stephen Kinnock, genuine refugees don't need points-based systems for employment. Look, I think this is a work in progress. I thank you for coming on and explaining Labour's policy. I can't pretend I'm that much clearer at the end of it. Gold-plated public sector pensions are the real time bombs that could bankrupt Britain, says Liam Halligan, economics editor of GB News. Put this in simple English, Liam, because it sounds desperately complicated.
It is desperately complicated. Well, let's think of the national debt. That's the amount of money that the government owes. That's doubled in the last decade to £2.3 trillion. That's 23, followed by 11 zeros. It's serious money. It's 95% of the size of the entire economy, what we call gross domestic product. And everyone knows about that, and the government pays debt on that interest, and it's monitored quite closely. But there's another debt that's even bigger. It's 2.6 trillion. It's bigger than the size of the economy, which means the national debt we talk about, quite literally, Nigel, isn't even the half of it. Because there's another whole national debt that represents the huge gold-plated, very, very generous pension entitlements of public sector workers. Now, I'm not talking about the basic state pension that we're all entitled to as long as we make our contributions over our working life. I'm talking about the pensions for the fifth of us, it's just under a fifth, who work in the public sector. That's NHS workers, police, and in particular civil servants, you know, mandarins in Whitehall and elsewhere. And their pension arrangements are far, far more generous than those of us in the private sector enjoy, even though we pay for their pensions with our taxes. And it used to be argued often, and you'll often hear it said now, that all those public sector workers, they get much lower wages than the private sector. But they don't. The average public sector wage is about 8% higher than the private sector, and it's been higher for years. And then they get the massive pension entitlements, taxpayer backed on top of that.
I mean, this is almost like pensions apartheid, isn't it, between the public sector and the private sector? But isn't the real racket here that so many in the public sector are retiring at 60?
Well, there have been reforms in recent years, which means people join the public sector now. They join what's called an average salary scheme, and the retirement ages for those are later. But for people who are in existing schemes, many of them who've joined quite recently, Nigel, they're enjoying pension arrangements that were designed 50 years ago when people lived sort of, 10 years less.
So what do we do, Liam? I mean, we can clearly stop these gold-plated pensions for those that come into the civil service or whatever public sector it is now. But with the existing people, I mean, we're a country that likes to keep its promises.
We do, but we don't want to have a race to the bottom, but many people with gold-plated final salary schemes in the private sector, they've lost those pensions. They've had to fall back on something called the Pension Protection Fund. They don't get their inflation indexing. They don't get their pensions uprated each year for prices, as they were promised when they made years of contributions in the private sector. Look, our demography is changing. We all need to share the burden of that change, but it strikes me that an awful lot of people in the public sector are getting huge pension entitlements that are completely unrealistic, given that that's a guaranteed income every year for the rest of your life, and we're living, 5-10 years more than we were when I was born not so many decades ago.
Well, I have to say, the fact the national debt actually is double the size that we believe it is. Final thought, Liam, Citibank saying inflation could go to 18%. You were writing in the Sunday Telegraph this weekend about your fears for strikes this autumn. Perhaps groups of unions, not quite a general strike, but groups of unions coming together. Goodness me, Liz Truss is going to face, if she wins, one heck of a challenge.
Well, she is most likely to be Prime Minister. It is going to be a baptism of fire. It's not so much the private sector unions, though we are hearing, of course, about strikes at Felixstowe, private sector union. In theory, the train drivers are a private sector union. But only 12% of us who work in the private sector are in trade unions these days. In the public sector, Nigel, it's over 50%, back where it was in the bad old days of the 1970s and the winter of discontent. And my concern is, and there's already the drums are beating across the public sector, the increasingly militant public sector union bosses are going to really test an incoming Tory Prime Minister. There could easily be a political crisis. I think if the civil service strikes, if the nurses strike, if the teachers strike, pretty much all at once, they'll be saying, oh, we get paid less. They don't. They get paid more on average than the rest of us. And they won't mention their pensions.
I tell you what.
It could cause a political crisis. I think, Nigel, I don't like to say this, it could even topple the government at some stage.
Well, we'll see whether she's an Iron Lady or not, won't we? Liam Halligan, we're going to see a lot more of you over the next few months. Now, we talked about Labour a moment ago. Let's talk about a former Labour Prime Minister, Tony Blair. Yes, not content with ruining the lives of millions of young people by saying we should send as many youngsters as possible to university. Yes, the ambition was 50% to go to university. The Conservatives supported it all the way through. Those of us like me that were sceptical were written off as being dinosaurs. No, we could run the British economy with lots and lots of cheap imported foreign labour. Well, not content with ruining the prospects of millions of young people, Blair has intervened again in the education system. He wants to scrap GCSEs, scrap A-levels and move to a system based on continuous assessment. The one area where I might agree with him is where he says we have an analogue exam system for a digital world, and that possibly is a fair point. So should we listen to Blair, scrap GCSEs and A-levels? Well, who better to speak to than Lord Kenneth Baker, the father of the GCSE?
That's right.
Before we had O-levels and CSEs, and your plan was to bring it all together.
Yes. I had introduced GCSEs in 1980 because there was a need for them. Because in those days, 50% of the students left school at 16, and they needed a leaving certificate. Just as when I took the predecessor, a school certificate in 1950, then 93% left school. Today, 93% stay on. So you don't need a leaving certificate, which is the purpose of having an exam at 16. We're the only country in Europe that has a demanding exam at 16. None other country have it. They make changes at 13, 14 and 15 to separate out the academic from the technical and vocational. And they're very much more successful. It's one of the reasons why they have much lower levels of youth unemployment than we have. And so Tony Blair is now right, but he has changed his view on this. In 2004, he had a proposal to set up a phase in education from 14 to 18 with a distinct separate curriculum.
Yep.
Very good idea, liked by Blunkett, liked by Adonis, but Tony Blair said, no, it'll destroy A-levels, I must defend them. So 8 years later, he changed his mind. I don't quarrel with MPs changing their minds, or ex-ministers of their own sort. If the arguments have moved on, then reflect what is right. And it's quite right.
Well, Tony Blair's arguing that education now is much better than it was 25 years ago. And his marker is that nearly 60% go to university. But surely, Kenneth Baker, education is about more than just academic exams. Well, and we've really talked down trades and skills in this country, haven't we?
Absolutely, totally. And that's why for the last 12 years I've been setting up university technical colleges. We have 47 of these colleges now, with nearly 20,000 students. And they don't have to do the national curriculum, which Michael Gove imposed upon the country. The national curriculum in all schools is now just 8 subjects. 2 exams in English, 1 in maths, 3 in science, 1 in a foreign language, and either history or geography. Doesn't it sound sensible? It's a grammar school curriculum. And this was imposed. And as a result, we've done nothing for those 2 million disadvantaged students over the last 12 years. If you look at disadvantaged children in 2010 and look at them, it's the same number, about 2 million. And so this great experiment that somehow they'd bubble up has not happened. And so the only way that we're going to be a successful country is actually to have better vocational skill training in our schools.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that.
Totally, absolutely.
I'm delighted to hear that.
For example, I want all 11-year-olds to be starting with computing at 11. Because of what the government did some years ago in abolishing a GSC, there's been 40% less teaching of computing in schools since 2016. Isn't that mad?
We
live in a digital age.
That is extraordinary.
Totally digital age.
I did acknowledge, I thought Blair was perhaps right about that point. Final thought on this. If we're now leaving school at 18 as opposed to 16, we need some sort of end-of-school exam, don't we? Are we thinking the sort of baccalaureate model,
Yes,
back to school cert, perhaps, I don't know.
You need something like a tech back. This is what I favour. I would like to see a tech back, which includes technical and academic subjects as well. Now, the point about this is that now 93% go on to 18. Now, many of them leave college with no school, no employability talent at all. They're not being taught about business. And what business is saying to them, we want you, have you had any experience of working in a team? No. Have you engaged in serious problem solving? No. Have you made things with your hands and fixed things? No. Are you creative, imaginative? No. Are you capable of critical thinking? Now, we have to therefore change the curriculum. It's not just the exams, Nigel, I'm saying. You have to change the curriculum. Now, there have been 6 reports, of which Blair's is the last, saying that the present national curriculum, which is these 8 academic subjects, are not fit for purpose. And so they should come down to 5 subjects only in test, maths, English, 2 science and data skills. And then each school should decide what else they want to do. Possibly business studies, possibly some of the cultural subjects. All these have dropped in the last 12 years. Design and technology have dropped by 80%.
Yeah, I saw that.
And dance, drama, music, all the things wanted by the entertainment industry, which is going through a boom at the moment now with streaming and Netflix.
We've got a lot to
by
talk
40%.
You know, we've got a lot to talk about.
What I would say to the 2 people trying to be the next Prime Minister, you've got to accept the fact that you should engage in major educational reform. It's not tinkering, it's not playing around with new ideas like more grammar schools or anything like that. Concentrate on technical schools. Concentrate on technical education, because that's where your growth is going to come from. Your productivity growth is going to come. You can't have growth in an economy, Nigel, you know this, unless you have skilled workers to fill it. And we've now got a massive, massive number of unfilled vacancies for data analysts, for software engineers,
I have to say,
and all the rest of it.
I have to say, your passion for this subject, decades after you were Education Secretary, is impressive. Very much. Thank you for contributing.
It's nice talking to you again. It's been a long time.
Too long, far too long. Come and see us again, because education our young people will not go away. In a moment, I'll be joined on Talking Pints by Brian Toomey, a remarkable Irish jockey who was basically dead on the floor of the racetrack. Boy, has he made a comeback to life. Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's time for Talking Pints, and I'm joined by Brian Toomey, who's an Irish lad, so we're going to do it McGuinness. Absolutely. Cheers, welcome
Cheers, Nigel.
to Talking Pints. Now, Brian, you were 23 years old, professional jockey, doing pretty well. You'd had 80 winners, ratio about 1 in 10 rides, something like that. So you were up and coming, talented, doing what you loved, doing what you wanted to do. And then it's Perth, it's July 2013. You're on the favourite. You're on the favourite. Tell us what happens.
Yeah, I was going there, obviously very excited. I was going up to Perth to ride a favourite. Yeah, and things didn't go as planned, really. The horse was out of contention. It was never looked like winning, and unfortunately took a real heavy fall 3 out, and it was lights out for a little bit.
Well, you say lights out. I mean, you know, what actually happened? Did the horse fall on you, or?
The horse fell, and I don't think the horse even fell on top of me. I just, whatever way my head hit the ground at that speed, and obviously being July, the ground would have been quite hard. It would have been quick ground, and whatever way I landed or whatever way I hit my head, I was just very unlucky.
I mean, it's a very dangerous sport anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a very dangerous sport, but I mean, it's a passion. You're getting paid to do your hobby. It's a thrilling job to have, and I was very lucky that I was very happy with the career I was having.
Well, you were in a good place. But I mean, you know, all the reports say that you know, the medics say you were clinically dead for 7 seconds. In fact, there was even a report put out by the British Horse Racing Authority, I understand. The sad news of Brian Toomey's passing. How did all this happen?
Yeah, well, on the day of the injury, like, word had got out how bad it was, and my poor family were rang up in Ireland and told to get over yesterday. You know what I mean? They didn't have long. They didn't have long to say their goodbyes. That it was very, very bad, and obviously they come over to face the worst.
Yeah. What do you remember of it, Brian? Anything?
Not a single thing. I was in hospital for 157 nights, and I don't remember a single thing from there.
Really?
Yeah.
That's how bad the damage was, or the state you were in.
Yeah.
How do you? I mean, I've been through a couple of knocks in my time. I've had a plane crash and goodness knows what, but I've not had. I had a fractured skull, but I've not been through that kind of brain trauma that you've been through. I mean, what's the process to recover?
It's a very, very slow recovery, and it was very difficult because after I had a brain injury, you feel like you can't open up to anyone about it. You feel like no one's going to understand what you're going through, and as a younger lad, obviously I had a lot of pride. I didn't want to let on how much it was affecting me as such, because once my recovery was over, I wanted to get back living a normal life, and I was kind of afraid that if I let on how much it was affecting me, that obviously people close by would have been a little bit cautious of me going forward. So it was a very lonely recovery.
So it's a male pride thing?
Yeah, I think so.
Gosh. So you must have felt quite lonely in a funny way.
Yeah, it was a very lonely recovery, and listen, I was quite a forward-going young lad. I tried to be the life of every party I go to, even the ones that gate crash. But yeah, it was very difficult because from the moment I could get up and walk again, I tried to live life to the full, kind of thing.
Your career, what you set your mind to do, what you worked at, what you travelled for, was kind of gone. You tried to make a comeback, but it was never going to work, was it?
No, I'm surprised I ever got back. I don't know how many doctors I conned in order to get back, because in order to get past fit to ride again, you have to be at no greater risk than every other jockey. So obviously AP McCoy was still riding at the time. I had to be at no greater risk than AP McCoy, but my last fall, I lost consciousness. I had a metal plate in my head, so I feel like that I I can't believe I ever got back, but I was glad because it was a goal I was working towards, and it was the only thing that kind of kept the drive.
When you look at it, Brian, you know, you were alive, recovering, but you'd lost your career. You'd had an horrendous injury. Did you feel you'd been lucky or unlucky?
I feel like, I mean, I count my blessings every day. I feel very, very lucky. There was a time after the injury when I was a lot younger, I felt very hard done by, but with that all behind me, I'm the luckiest man in the world, to be honest. I can't believe what I've been lucky enough to overcome, and I mean, there's a lot to take from it. It's made me far more determined. I'm far more driven, and yeah, I've been very, very lucky.
Now, you're living in Lambourne, you're still very much in racing world, and I understand you've got a new ambition, a new drive. You want to become a trainer.
Yeah, it's my only goal. I want to become a trainer, and yeah, I've completed my trainer's course maybe 5 years ago, but and I've been striving to achieve that ever since. But it's probably a blessing really that it hasn't happened quickly, because I've had a long time to think about it. I've got many plans in place that I'm ready to put forward when I get the chance, or when I get the opportunity to start. But it's I've been around a lot of people. I've learned off some very good people. Every day is a school day, so you're still learning. So yeah, hopefully in time I'll get started and I can train a horse for you.
Well, you never know. I'm not sure. I'm quite in the income category.
That wouldn't make the headlines.
Well, it certainly would. And hey, you've really pushed me on this one. I might have a leg in a horse that you train. And, you know, racing, the Irish connection with racing, of course, is absolutely huge. You know, I was at... in fact, the last pint of Guinness I had was at Cheltenham earlier on this year. And there are more Irish at Cheltenham than there are English, I think.
I thought I was taking you out of a comfort zone with the Guinness, but...
No, perfectly happy. Don't worry about that. Should young people, young boys, young girls who love horses, love riding, when they look at you, what happened to you, should it put them off?
I don't think so. Listen, it's a passion. It's a very exciting hobby to start, and then if you can have a career out of it, in the end, I feel you're very lucky. I mean, I wouldn't put anyone off it. Yeah, it's very dangerous, but walking across the road is dangerous. Even after the injury, I had to resit my driving test, and I passed, thankfully. But well I was told that you have a 25% chance of having a car crash. I mean, so anything in life is dangerous, so I couldn't put anyone off.
And the love for racing, the love for horses, the love for the sport, the love for the industry.
Yeah, it's a very exciting industry to be in. I mean, you're surrounded by a beautiful animal every day. I mean, horses can't talk to you, so it's an opinions game, really. So, good job I've got good opinions, I think. But listen, I couldn't put anyone off it. It's top sport.
Well, I've got to tell you, Brian, for a man who was clinically dead, you're doing pretty well.
Not too bad. I think we've both been very lucky, to be fair. And
yes,
even if anyone's seen what you've been through, it would inspire anyone. I think the one thing I would say, if anyone is going through anything like that, the one thing that got me by was having a goal, having that drive to get the life back that I had, or do you know what I mean, for my life to progress.
Not to be a victim.
Exactly. And as I say, I feel very lucky.
Inspiring story. Brian, thank you for joining me.
Thanks very much.
On Talking Pints. Well, quite a story, that. Now, I've got 2 minutes left with you, and I will go for some Barrage the Farages. What have you sent me today? Robbo asks, gun and knife crime seems to have become commonplace now in our society. Why do you think law and order is breaking down so badly? Robbo, there are lots and lots of different reasons. There is family breakdown. There is community breakdown that I talked about at the top of the programme. You know, when people living in cities don't even know the names of their next-door neighbours, don't, in many cases, share interests, share culture, or maybe even share language, that is a pretty bad start. But I thought Our conversation on policing was really, really interesting. You know, they've intellectualised policing. They've taken policing off the streets. Listen, there are lots and lots of reasons. I can't answer it all in one question. But do we have a problem in our big cities? You bet we do. Is it impossible to turn it around? I'll never accept that after what Rudy Giuliani did for New York as mayor. Mark asks me, is that really the view of Westminster out of your studio, or is it graphics? Mark, I promise you, that is it. And as the darker evenings come, you'll see it lit up. You'll see the cars going over the bridge. You're quite right. Most TV studios absolutely con you with the background. This is the real deal, and it is, without doubt, not just the best studio view in London. It may well be the best studio view in the whole of the world. How about that? And I'm very fortunate to be here, as is this Stein chap who's coming after me, but I haven't finished yet. Karen asks, if the new PM offered you a job to sort out the migrant problem, would you accept it? And could you do it? No, not as a member of the ECHR, not as a member, a treaty organisation where their court can overrule our court, and where under Article 8, if your 16th cousin removed once visited Coventry, you'll be allowed to stay in the country because you have the right to a family life. You should never accept a job in life that you can't do, either because the game is set against you, or because you don't have the ability to do it. Could I be tough enough to do it? Could I take the abuse that Tony Abbott took? You bet your life I could, but you need the tools to be able to do it. 1,295 across the channel yesterday. Today is lower, it's 160. In the next 3 days, there are 2 absolutely flat, calm days coming. There's a lot more coming our way, and Westminster is doing nothing. Enough from me. Over to Mark Stein.
Yeah, and in 2018, when this all got going, there were just 299. Less than one a day, and now over 1,000 a day. Where is that? People have got the message. The world's got the message. Great show, Nigel, and you're quite right about crime-ridden Britain. It's much easier to break a society than it is to put it back together again. We got a great show for you, and we hope you'll be sticking around for that. We have Lord Sumption coming up immediately after the news, and we have some interesting aspects from people who've been banned on social media. But Lord Sumption will take apart the online harms bill for us, and that's coming up straight after the weather.
Good evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Some big contrast with the weather tomorrow. A soggy Wednesday in some spots, but a hot one across East Anglia and the southeast. We're all going to start fairly warm. It's going to be a humid night tonight. Low pressure is kind of in control of things, but these weather fronts and the position of them is crucial. This one coming into the southwest, approaching Wales, will bring some fairly persistent rain, of course, particularly southwest Wales tonight and tomorrow. The rain, though, will spread more widely across Wales tonight into parts of northern England eventually and southern Scotland. 1 or 2 showers across the east this evening, 1 or 2 heavy ones as well, but they're fading away, and for most it's dry, and for most of us a really warm and humid night. Look at these temperatures for England and Wales. Towns and cities staying in the high teens quite widely. The details for Wednesday, as I said, some places having a very wet day. Certainly a pretty wet start for parts of northern England and Scotland, but it should turn drier here. However, southwest Wales keeping the rain going for most of the day. And again, it spreads back to North Wales and northwest England by the afternoon. At times, that rain affecting southwest England, but either side, most places dry. Slightly fresher day for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but pleasant in the sunshine. But look at the temperatures across East Anglia and the southeast, likely to hit 30 Celsius in 1 or 2 spots. So pretty hot here. That might spark 1 or 2 late thundery showers. The rain is likely to continue over parts of northwest England, Wales and southwest England during Wednesday evening. And then we could see some thundery rain drifting up from France across the Channel, bringing some heavy downpours to East Anglia and the southeast. Some welcome rain in this part of the world, but it could be pretty intense. Some thunderstorms are possible. May cause some disruption. So that's something to keep an eye on. During Thursday, that probably clearing away. A few showers in the northwest, but otherwise most places on Thursday dry and bright with sunny spells. Still pretty warm across the southeast on Thursday, but elsewhere start to lose that humidity with a fresher feel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last